He's the kind of man who solves problems calmly. She's the kind of woman who turns chaos into art. And when a stubborn ex turns into a constant presence, they invent the most dangerous remedy, a fake relationship, complete with photos, dinners, and rehearsed affection. The catch? The world doesn't forgive improvisation. And their friends. They seem to have PhDs in embarrassment. Claire Morrison had always believed that no was a complete sentence. Apparently, her ex-boyfriend had missed that particular lesson in basic human communication. She stood in her favorite coffee shop in Bristol's Clifton Village, camera bag slung over her shoulder, trying very hard to pretend she didn't see him through the window. Thomas, or as her friends had started calling him, the human boomerang, was crossing the street with a bouquet of sunflowers that looked like he'd wrestled them from an over-eager garden. "Please don't come in, please don't come in," she muttered under her breath, squeezing her eyes shut like a child who believed invisibility worked that way. "Talking to yourself again?" a familiar voice said beside her. "That's usually my thing when I'm stuck on a design problem." Claire opened one eye to find Mason Harper sliding into the seat across from her, all 6'3" of him, folding into the tiny cafe chair with the grace of someone who'd spent years navigating spaces not built for his frame. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, probably from running his hands through it while working, a habit she'd watched him develop since they were teenagers. His hazel eyes, sharp and observant behind black-framed glasses, caught the slight tension in her shoulders immediately. "He's outside, isn't he?" Mason didn't even need to look. "With sunflowers," Claire confirmed miserably. "The really aggressive kind." "Sunflowers can be aggressive?" "When wielded by Thomas, yes, they're basically botanical weapons of emotional manipulation." If this story is touching your heart, show your support. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Every action helps us keep bringing you new stories full of emotion. Mason snorted, taking a sip of the coffee she'd already ordered for him. Black, 2 sugars, the same way he'd been drinking it since university. "How long has it been now?" 3 months since I ended it. 3 months of flowers, text messages, showing up at gallery openings, and... She lowered her voice. "Last week he sent a singing telegram to my studio." "A singing telegram, Mason." "In 2025. What did they sing?" "Sorry seems to be the hardest word." The neighbors complained about the noise. Mason's laugh was cut short when the cafe door chimed. Thomas entered, sunflowers held aloft like a peace offering to angry gods, his eyes scanning the room with the determination of a man who'd watched too many romantic comedies and learned all the wrong lessons. Claire slid down in her seat. "Oh God, he's seen me." "Claire!" Thomas's voice carried across the small space, causing several patrons to look up from their laptops and artisan pastries. "I've been calling you. These are for you, your favorite flowers." "My favorite flowers are peonies," Claire whispered to Mason. "I told him that at least 15 times when we were dating." "Claire, please, can we just talk?" Thomas had reached their table now, slightly out of breath, his brown hair flopping into his eyes in what he probably thought was an endearing manner. "I know I made mistakes, but we were good together. Everyone says so." "Thomas," Claire started, her voice firm but tired, the tone of someone who'd had this conversation too many times to count. "I've changed," he interrupted, setting the sunflowers on the table with such force that water sloshed from the plastic wrapping. "I'm seeing a therapist now. Well, I went to one session, but I'm committed to growth." Mason watched this exchange with the quiet intensity of someone cataloguing every detail, the way Claire's jaw tightened, how her fingers gripped her coffee cup a little too hard, the slight tremor in her voice when she said, "Thomas, I've told you it's over. I'm sorry, but I need you to respect that." "But we have history!" Thomas's voice was climbing in pitch and volume. 5 years, Claire. You can't just throw that away." 3 years, Claire corrected. "We dated for 3 years and I'm not throwing it away. I'm moving forward. There's a difference." "Is this because of him?" Thomas's eyes suddenly fixed on Mason, with the dawning realization of a man whose romantic comedy script had just introduced an unexpected rival. "Are you two—" "Thomas, Mason is my best friend. He has nothing to do with—" "How long has he been in the picture?" Thomas's voice had taken on a suspicious edge now. "Were you seeing him while we were together?" "Okay, that's enough." Mason's voice was quiet but carried an authority that made Thomas step back involuntarily. He didn't stand, didn't need to. The shift in his posture alone made it clear that patience had limits. Claire has asked you repeatedly to respect her decision. The flowers, the messages, the singing telegrams, they need to stop. And who are you to tell me what to do? Thomas shot back, though his bravado wavered slightly under Mason's steady gaze. Someone who actually listens when she says no. The words landed like stones in still water. Thomas looked between them, his expression cycling through confusion, hurt, and finally settling on stubborn determination, the worst possible outcome. "This isn't over, Claire," he said, grabbing his sunflowers back with the air of a scorned hero in his own dramatic narrative. "I know you still have feelings for me. You're just confused." He backed toward the door, nearly tripping over a chair. "I'll prove it to you. I'll prove I'm the one." The door chimed his exit. Silence settled over their table. Claire dropped her head into her hands. "He's never going to stop, is he?" "He thinks he's the protagonist in some grand romantic gesture story," Mason said, his voice gentler now. "Someone needs to tell him he's actually the antagonist who doesn't realize the heroine has already moved on." "I've tried everything," Claire said, and Mason hated the defeat in her voice. "I've been clear, I've been kind, I've even been mean. Nothing works. He just persists." Mason studied her across the table, really looked at her in the way he'd trained himself not to do too often. Claire, with her honey-brown hair caught in a messy bun, a few strands escaping to frame her face. Her green eyes currently clouded with frustration that lit up like sun through leaves when she laughed. The small scar above her left eyebrow from when they'd attempted to build a treehouse at 14, and she'd proven better with power tools than he'd been. The way she bit her lower lip when she was thinking, which she was doing right now. 15 years of friendship meant he'd catalogued every detail, memorized every expression, learned to read her moods like weather patterns. It also meant he'd become exceptionally good at hiding the fact that somewhere between teaching her to drive stick shift and being her +1 to her cousin's wedding, he'd fallen completely, irrevocably in love with her. "What if," Mason heard himself say, the words forming before his brain could properly vet them, "you had a boyfriend?" Claire looked up, confused. "What?" "Not a real one," he clarified, his mind already racing ahead to the inevitable disaster this would become. "A fake one. Just convincing enough to make Thomas finally believe it's really over. Mason, hear me out." He leaned forward, warming to the idea despite every logical part of his brain screaming that this was possibly the worst plan he'd ever conceived, and he'd once designed a bridge model that collapsed spectacularly during his university presentation. "Thomas is persisting because he thinks he still has a chance. But if you were clearly, publicly involved with someone else, he'd have to accept reality." "And where exactly would I find someone willing to pretend to be my boyfriend?" Claire asked, though he could see the wheels turning in her mind, the photographer in her already visualizing how it might work. Mason took a breath. This was it. The moment he'd either regret forever or, well, regret differently. "Me," he said simply. "I'll do it." Claire stared at him. "You're serious?" "Completely. We're best friends. We already spend most of our time together. We know everything about each other. It would be believable." He kept his voice level, casual, as if he were proposing they try a new restaurant instead of suggesting a scheme that would require him to pretend to date the woman he was actually in love with. "We stage a few photos for social media, have some public dates, and Thomas gets the message. Simple." "Mason, that's—" Claire trailed off, and for a terrifying moment he thought she'd seen right through him, seen the truth he'd been hiding for years. "That's actually not the worst idea you've ever had." High praise, considering the treehouse incident. A small smile tugged at her lips, the first genuine one he'd seen since Thomas's botanical invasion. "It would just be temporary, right? Just until he backs off." "Exactly. Temporary. Controlled. We'd set clear boundaries and rules." Even as he said it, Mason knew he was lying to himself. There was nothing controlled about agreeing to fake date the woman he'd been in love with since he was 21. Claire studied him for a long moment, and Mason forced himself to meet her gaze without flinching, without letting any of the truth show on his face. "Okay," she finally said. "Let's do it. Let's fake date until Thomas gives up." They shook hands across the table, sealing their agreement with the solemnity of people entering a business contract rather than a romantic deception. Mason held her hand perhaps a second longer than necessary, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. A gesture so natural he didn't realize he'd done it until she pulled away, a slight flush coloring her cheeks. "So," Claire said, clearing her throat, "when do we start Operation Fake Boyfriend? How about tonight? We'll plan the details over dinner. My place?" "It's a date," she said, then laughed at her own words. "I mean, it's not a date. It's a fake date planning session." "Obviously," Mason agreed, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. As they left the cafe together, Mason's hand instinctively found the small of her back, another natural gesture between friends. But this time, they both noticed. Both froze for half a second, before continuing as if nothing had changed. But something had changed. The moment they'd agreed to this plan, they'd stepped into unknown territory. Mason just hoped he'd survive it with their friendship intact, and his heart not completely shattered. What neither of them knew was that the hardest part about pretending to be in love would be pretending it was all an act. Mason's apartment overlooked the Bristol harbour side, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the evening light in shades of amber and gold. Claire had been here hundreds of times, had helped him pick out the absurdly expensive coffee machine that now sat gleaming on his kitchen counter, had fallen asleep on that very sofa during movie marathons, had even chosen the artwork on his walls when he'd admitted he had no idea what looks good. But tonight, walking through his door with a bottle of wine and the weight of their ridiculous plan settling over them, everything felt different, significant, like the space between them had been recalibrated somehow. "So," Mason said, setting out wine glasses with slightly more care than necessary, "I've been thinking about how to make this convincing." "You've been thinking about it for the last 4 hours. Claire settled onto his sofa, tucking her legs under her, in the familiar way that made his apartment feel more like home than it did when he was alone. "I'm an architect. I plan things. It's literally my job." He poured the wine, handed her a glass, and retrieved his laptop. "I may have created a document." "You created a document for our fake relationship? Would you prefer chaos and improvisation?" He opened the laptop to reveal what he'd titled Temporary Relationship Agreement, Morrison Harper Edition. Claire choked on her wine. "Oh my God, you're serious. You actually made a contract." "With subsections," Mason said, fighting a smile at her expression. "And footnotes. Footnotes. For dating. For fake dating. There's a difference." He settled beside her, close enough to share the screen but carefully maintaining the friendly distance they'd perfected over 15 years. "Besides, boundaries are important. We need to know exactly what we're agreeing to." Claire leaned closer to read, her shoulder brushing his arm, and Mason's carefully maintained focus wavered. She smelled like the jasmine perfume she'd worn since university, mixed with the faint chemical scent of photo-developing solution that clung to her clothes after long days in her studio. "Rule number 1, she read aloud. "No kissing on the mouth, cheek or forehead, only for photographs." She glanced at him. "Very specific. Clear boundaries prevent complications," Mason said, his voice perhaps a touch too controlled. The irony wasn't lost on him, creating rules to prevent the very things he wanted most. "Rule number 2, no hands in inappropriate places during public displays of affection." Claire's lips twitched. "Define inappropriate." "You know what I mean." "Do I, though? What if we're taking a photo and you need to put your hand on my waist? Is that inappropriate? What about my back? My hip? We need clarity here, counselor." Mason ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Claire recognized as his tell when he was flustered. "Waist is fine. Back is fine. Anywhere that would make your grandmother uncomfortable is not fine. My grandmother once told me she had a very active youth." "Your other grandmother. The proper one." Claire laughed, and the sound eased some of the tension thrumming through him. "Okay. Acceptable parameters established. What's Rule 3? No sleeping in the same residence unless absolutely necessary for maintaining the illusion. So separate houses, separate beds, very separate everything." Something flickered across her face. Disappointment. But it was gone before he could identify it properly. "Got it. Very professional. And Rule 4, this arrangement ends immediately once Thomas accepts the relationship is over and ceases all contact attempts." Mason looked at her steadily. "I don't want this to get weird between us, Claire. Our friendship is too important." The words felt like ash in his mouth, a necessary lie wrapped in a painful truth. Their friendship was important. Possibly the most important relationship in his life, which was precisely why he'd never told her that somewhere between their terrible adolescent poetry phase and now, he'd stopped seeing her as just his best friend and started seeing her as everything. "Nothing's going to get weird," Claire promised, clinking her glass against his. "We're adults, we're best friends, we can totally handle fake dating for a few weeks without it affecting anything." They both took long drinks of wine. "So," Claire said after a moment, "when do we launch Operation Fool Everyone?" "Tomorrow. There's a food market at St. Nicholas Market. Public, plenty of people we know, perfect for a casual first sighting." He pulled up his phone. "But first we need to establish our story. When did we start dating?" "Recently," Claire said. "Otherwise people will ask why we didn't say anything sooner." 3 weeks ago, Mason suggested. "Long enough to be serious, recent enough to explain the secrecy." "How did it happen?" "People will ask." Mason considered this. "The truth, but adjusted. We were having dinner like we do every week, but this time something shifted. The conversation went deeper than usual. And afterward, walking you home, He paused, choosing his words carefully while his heart hammered against his ribs. "I told you I couldn't imagine my life without you in it." Claire had gone very still beside him. "And then, what happened? You said you felt the same way, that you'd been feeling it for a while but were afraid to ruin what we had." The words came easier than they should, probably because they were closer to truth than fiction. "So we decided to try. To see if we could be more than friends." That's actually really believable," Claire said softly. "Maybe too believable." Their eyes met, held for a beat too long. Mason looked away first. "Right," he said, standing abruptly. "So tomorrow, St. Nicholas Market. We'll need photos for social media, that's what will really sell it." "I'm a photographer," Claire pointed out. "I can make us look convincing." "That's what I'm counting on." The next morning, Mason met Claire at the entrance to St. Nicholas Market, under a sky-threatening rain. Very Bristol. She'd dressed in dark jeans and a cream sweater that made her skin glow, her camera bag slung across her body like always. She looked exactly like herself, which somehow made what they were about to do feel more real and more fake at the same time. "Ready to lie to everyone we know?" she asked brightly. "When you put it that way, it sounds so much worse." Too late to back out now. She grabbed his hand, and even though he'd known this was coming, the contact sent electricity up his arm. "Come on, boyfriend, let's go be adorable." The market was crowded with Saturday morning shoppers, browsing stalls of fresh produce, artisan cheeses, and handcrafted jewelry. Mason bought her favorite lemon tarts from the French bakery stall, and when he held one up to her lips for her to taste, she bit into it while maintaining eye contact, an act so loaded with unintentional intimacy that he nearly dropped the pastry. "Good," he managed. "Perfect," she said, licking powdered sugar from her lower lip. Mason's brain short-circuited momentarily. "Photo time," Claire announced, pulling out her phone. "Put your arm around me." He did, his hand settling naturally at her waist. She leaned into him, fitting against his side like she'd been designed for that exact spot. Through her phone camera, they looked like any couple in love, easy, comfortable, happy. "Smile like you're actually enjoying yourself," Claire murmured. "I am enjoying myself, that's the problem." She looked up at him sharply, but he kept his expression neutral. "Take the photo," he said. She did. Then another, and another. Each one slightly different. Him looking at the camera while she looked up at him. Both of them laughing at something off-frame. His lips pressed to her temple, while her eyes were closed in what looked like contentment. "These are really good," Claire said, scrolling through them. "We look convincing." "Yeah, convincing." But her voice carried an odd note he couldn't quite identify. They were about to leave when a voice called out, "No, bloody way." Mason turned to find James, his best friend since university and the most persistently annoying person he knew, standing 5 feet away with a slowly spreading grin. "Are you two—" James gestured between them. "Is this what I think it is?" "James, hey," Mason started. "Oh my God, you're on a date. A real date. How long has this been going on?" 3 weeks, Claire said smoothly, stepping closer to Mason and taking his hand. "We wanted to keep it quiet at first." 3 weeks and you didn't tell me?" James looked genuinely offended. "Mate, I'm your best friend." "After Claire," Mason corrected. Yeah, but I'm your best guy friend. This is huge. Do you know how long I've been waiting for this? James pulled out his phone. I'm texting everyone. The group chat is going to explode. James, maybe don't, Mason began, but it was too late. James's thumbs were already flying across his screen. This is the best day ever, James said, looking between them with something approaching tears in his eyes. You two are perfect together. I always said so. Everyone said so. Remember that time in 2019 when I said, "We should go," Claire interrupted, clearly fighting laughter. "We have plans." "Oh, you have plans." James waggled his eyebrows in a way that should have been illegal. "Say no more. Use protection, kids." "James!" Mason felt his face heat. "What? I'm just being supportive." They escaped while James was still texting, probably sending those market photos to every person they'd ever met. 2 blocks away, safely out of sight, they both dissolved into laughter. "That went well," Claire gasped. "James is telling everyone as we speak, by tonight all of Bristol will think we're dating. Isn't that the point?" "Yes, but I thought we'd have more time to prepare." Mason's phone started buzzing. Then Claire's. Then both of them together in an electronic symphony of notifications. Claire pulled out her phone, her eyes widening. "Oh God, I have 47 text messages, and they're all in caps lock." Mason's screen showed similar chaos. The group chat titled Mason's Mental Health Check-ins, James's idea, was scrolling so fast he couldn't read individual messages. "Should we answer?" Claire asked. "Eventually, maybe after the shock wears off." They walked back toward her studio in companionable silence, hands swinging between them in a way that felt both natural and terrifying. "Mason," Claire said as they reached her door. "Yeah? Thank you for doing this. I know it's ridiculous and probably going to be complicated, but thank you." She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek, a gesture they'd done 1,000 times before. But this time, his hand came up to steady her, fingers splaying against her ribcage. This time her lips lingered a half-second longer. This time, when she pulled away, neither of them could quite meet the other's eyes. "Text me later," she said. "Always do." As he walked home, Mason's phone continued its relentless buzzing. He ignored it, replaying that moment outside her studio over and over, cataloguing every detail like he always did with her. Rule number 1, already strained. Rule number 2, technically intact, but barely. Rule number 3, safe for now. Rule number 4, suddenly feeling very far away. He'd agreed to this plan thinking he could control it, contain it, survive it with his heart intact. But watching Claire bite into that lemon tart, feeling her fit perfectly against his side, seeing their reflection in shop windows looking like a real couple, Mason was beginning to realize he'd miscalculated badly. Pretending to be in love with Claire Morrison wasn't going to be the hard part. The hard part was going to be remembering it was all pretend. Claire stared at her phone screen, her finger hovering over the post button like it was a detonator. The photo from St. Nicholas Market glowed back at her, Mason's arm around her waist, both of them laughing at something off-camera, looking stupidly happy, looking like a real couple, which they weren't. Obviously. "Just post it," she muttered to herself. "It's part of the plan." Her studio apartment, tucked above a vintage bookshop in Clifton, was scattered with prints from her latest project, architectural photography of Bristol's historic bridges. But today, the only image that mattered was the one on her phone. She hit post before she could overthink it further, adding a caption that felt simultaneously too revealing and not revealing enough. 3 weeks of keeping this quiet was harder than I thought. Her phone exploded immediately. Sarah, the dramatic friend. "Ah! I knew it! I've always known." Lucy, the skeptic. "Wait. What? No. This is fake. This has to be fake. You two have been friends for 15 years, and now you're dating." Emily, the liberal one. "Finally. Have you two, done it yet? I need details." Claire nearly dropped her phone. "Trust Emily to go there immediately." Claire. "We're taking things slow, Em. Very slow." Emily. "Boring. But also kind of hot. The anticipation must be killing you." If Emily only knew how accurate that was, though not for the reasons she thought. Claire's Instagram notifications were scrolling faster than she could read them. Heart emojis, shocked faces, Comments from people she'd gone to secondary school with and hadn't spoken to in a decade. Then one comment made her stomach flip. Thomas Williams. "We need to talk. This doesn't change anything. Call me." Her phone rang. "Mason. Tell me you're seeing the chaos," he said without preamble. "My phone might actually catch fire from the activity." "Mine too. James has created a group chat called Mason Finally Grew a Pair and added literally everyone we know." Claire burst out laughing despite herself. "That's actually impressive dedication to humiliation. He's calling it a public service. Apparently watching us dance around each other for years was painful for everyone involved." Mason's voice carried that dry humor she'd always loved. "The worst part, he's convinced this happened because of some meaningful look I gave you at his wedding last year. You didn't give me any meaningful looks at his wedding." A pause. Right. Of course not. Something in his tone made her pulse quicken, but before she could analyze it, he continued. "Thomas commented on your post. I saw. He also texted me. Twice. That's what we wanted, right? To get his attention." Mason sounded oddly tense. "Has it worked?" He says, "This doesn't change anything, so maybe not yet. Then we need to increase visibility. There's a gallery opening tomorrow night, contemporary architecture photography. We should go together. Very publicly together." "Mason, that's—" Claire stopped. Tomorrow's opening was at the gallery where she occasionally exhibited, where Thomas knew she'd be. "That's actually perfect. He'll definitely be there. I know, I checked the guest list." "You checked the— Never mind, yes, let's do it." She took a breath. "I should probably warn you. Sarah wants to meet for lunch tomorrow. To hear everything." Her words, including the ominous finger quotes I could hear through the text. "James wants to take me for pints tonight for the same reason. I'm going to have to lie to my best friend about being in love with my other best friend. This plan is going great." Claire laughed, but it sounded hollow even to her own ears. "We knew this would be complicated." "Claire." His voice softened. "Are you okay? Really?" And that was the thing about Mason Harper. He always knew when to push past the surface, when to dig deeper. 15 years of friendship meant he could read her like one of his architectural blueprints. "I'm fine," she lied. "Just, it's weird, you know? Pretending." "Yeah," he said quietly. "Weird." Another pause, loaded with something neither of them would name. "I should go," Claire said finally. "I need to prepare myself for Sarah's interrogation. She's probably already created a presentation." "Text me after. Let me know if you need rescue." "You'd drive across town to save me from my own friend?" "I'd drive across the country, Claire. You know that." She did know that. That was part of the problem. Thursday seemed sealed the next day. Sarah ambushed her at a cafe with the subtlety of a battering ram. "Start talking," she demanded the moment Claire sat down, her eyes already shimmering with tears. "And don't leave out a single detail. When did you know? How did it happen? Has he said he loves you? Have you said it back?" "Sarah, breathe." "I can't breathe. This is the most romantic thing that's ever happened to anyone I know. Do you understand what this means? You're going to have the most beautiful babies. I've already planned your wedding. It's in spring. No, wait, autumn. Definitely autumn. With those leaves you both love." "We've been dating for 3 weeks," Claire interrupted. 3 weeks of concentrated love? That's like 3 years in normal people time. Sarah grabbed both of Claire's hands across the table. "Tell me everything. The first kiss. The first time he held your hand. The first time you looked at him and thought, 'Oh God, I'm in love with him.'" Claire's stomach twisted. "Sarah, because I saw it, you know, years ago. The way you looked at him when he wasn't watching. The way he looked at you when you weren't watching. It was like watching 2 people drowning who were too stubborn to reach for the life preserver. That's very poetic for someone who works in IT. Don't deflect. I want details." So Claire gave her the story she and Mason had crafted. The dinner that changed everything, the confession, the decision to try. She'd practiced it enough that it came out smooth, believable, too believable. Sarah was crying openly now. "That's so beautiful. You're both so beautiful. Life is beautiful." The woman at the next table gave them a concerned look. "Maybe lower the volume?" Claire suggested. "How can I be quiet at a time like this?" Sarah wiped her eyes dramatically. "Promise me you'll let me photograph your wedding." "Wait, you're the photographer. Can you photograph your own wedding? Is that possible?" "Sarah, we've been together for 3 weeks." "So? When you know, you know. And Mason has known for years. We all saw it. The way he showed up every time you needed him. The way he memorized your coffee order, your favorite flowers, the way you organize your camera equipment. That's not friendship, babe. That's devotion. Claire's throat tightened. Mason and we're taking it slow. Ugh, you're both so noble and respectful. It's disgusting and perfect. Sarah squeezed her hands tighter. But seriously, Claire, I'm so happy for you. You deserve this. You deserve someone who sees you the way he does. If only Sarah knew the truth, that Mason was only pretending to see her that way. That every tender look, every gentle touch, every moment that felt real was carefully constructed fiction. Claire's phone buzzed. A text from Mason. Surviving Sarah. She smiled despite herself and typed back, barely. She's already planning our wedding. What season? Autumn. Apparently we both love leaves. We do love leaves. Good choice, Sarah. How is James? Currently trying to convince me that my meaningful look at his wedding was the turning point. I've given up correcting him. Also, he wants to throw us an engagement party. I told him we're nowhere near that. He said, yet, in all caps. Claire snorted, drawing another look from the neighboring table. Gallery tonight? Mason texted. Pick you up at 7. It's a date. I mean, you know what I mean. Yeah, I know. But sitting there with Sarah still crying happy tears across from her, Claire wasn't entirely sure she knew what she meant anymore. The line between pretending and real was starting to blur. Mason adjusted his tie for the 3rd time, standing outside Claire's studio and feeling ridiculously nervous for someone who was just picking up his best friend. Fake girlfriend. Best friend who was fake girlfriend. The distinction was getting harder to maintain. The door opened before he could knock, and whatever coherent thought he'd been attempting evaporated completely. Claire wore a black dress, simple, elegant, with a neckline that was perfectly appropriate and somehow devastating. Her hair was down, falling in waves over her shoulders in a way that made his fingers itch to touch it. She'd done something different with her makeup that made her green eyes impossibly larger. Is this okay? She asked, suddenly self-conscious under his stare. I wasn't sure if... You look beautiful, Mason said, the words escaping before his brain could filter them through the just friends protocol. I mean, you always look beautiful. Obviously. But tonight you look... Yeah. Smooth, Harper. Very smooth. A flush crept across her cheeks. You clean up pretty well yourself. He'd worn the navy suit she'd once told him made his eyes look more green than brown. Not that he'd remembered that comment for 3 years or anything. The gallery was across town, which meant 20 minutes in his car. 20 minutes of her perfume filling the enclosed space, of her hand occasionally brushing his arm when she gestured, of trying to concentrate on driving while hyper-aware of her presence. Mason, she said about 10 minutes in. Are you okay? You seem tense. I'm fine. Just, mentally preparing for the performance. Right. The performance. She was quiet for a moment. Do you think Thomas will actually be there? According to the guest list, yes, along with about 50 other people we know, all of whom have seen the Instagram post and will be watching us very carefully. No pressure then. None at all. They pulled into the gallery parking area, and Mason came around to open her door, a gesture that was automatic after years of friendship, but now felt weighted with significance. When he offered his hand to help her out, she took it, and neither of them let go immediately. Ready? He asked. Ready, she confirmed, threading her fingers through his, with a confidence that made his heart stutter. The gallery was already crowded with Bristol's art and architecture crowd, people in designer glasses, discussing spatial dynamics while sipping wine that cost more than Mason's first car. Geometric sculptures caught the light from carefully positioned spots, and photographs of modernist buildings lined the walls in stark black frames. They made it approximately 30 seconds before being swarmed. There they are! James appeared like a summoned demon, his girlfriend Emma in tow. The happy couple. Look, Emma, they're even holding hands. It's adorable. James, volume control, Mason started. How can I control my volume when my best friend is finally experiencing romantic love? James grabbed Mason's free shoulder and shook it enthusiastically. Do you know how long I've waited for this moment? Apparently since your wedding last year, Claire said deadpan. Exactly, that look you gave her, mate. I knew it then. Emma, bless her, rolled her eyes apologetically. He's been like this all week. I've had to listen to theories about your relationship trajectory. He has a spreadsheet. A spreadsheet? Mason repeated. With graphs, Emma confirmed. Color-coded graphs tracking your meaningful interactions over the past 5 years. That's, Claire trailed off, actually concerning. I prefer thorough, James said proudly. Anyway, you two look amazing, very coupley. When's the engagement? James, 3 voices said in unison. What? I'm just asking what everyone's thinking. You've known each other for 15 years. Why wait? Because we've been officially dating for 3 weeks, Mason said through gritted teeth. Details, details. James waved this away. Love doesn't follow timelines, my friend. Speaking of which, he leaned in conspiratorially. How's the physical side of things? Because you both have this we haven't done it yet vibe, and I'm dying to know if I'm right. Claire made a choking sound. Mason seriously considered murder. We're taking things slow, Claire managed. Oh, tension, I love it. The anticipation, the yearning. James, Emma interrupted firmly, we talked about boundaries. But boundaries, James deflated slightly. Fine, but I expect updates, regular updates, with details. That's not Thomas at 3 o'clock, James suddenly stage-whispered, and sure enough Claire's ex was cutting through the crowd toward them with the determination of a man on a mission. Mason felt Claire tense beside him. Instinctively his arm went around her waist, pulling her closer against his side. Protective, possessive in a way that had nothing to do with their fake relationship agreement. Claire, Thomas said, stopping in front of them with barely a glance at Mason. We need to talk privately. I don't think so, Mason said, his voice taking on an edge that made James's eyes widen with interest. This doesn't concern you, Thomas shot back. Claire and I have history. Had history, Claire corrected, and Mason felt a surge of pride at the firmness in her voice. Past tense. Thomas, I've moved on. With him. Thomas finally looked at Mason properly, his expression cycling through disbelief to indignation. Your friend, seriously? My boyfriend, Claire said, and the word sent an electric current through Mason's entire body. And yes, seriously, you can't be serious. This is a rebound or a phase or... Thomas was getting louder now, drawing attention from nearby gallery patrons. Claire, we had 5 years together. 3 years, both Mason and Claire corrected simultaneously. Thomas's face reddened. Whatever. The point is, what you and I had was real. This, he gestured at them dismissively, this is just your best friend playing pretend boyfriend because you're too scared to be alone. The accusation hung in the air, ugly and presumptuous. Mason felt Claire flinch against him, and something protective and primal surged through his chest. Let me make something very clear, Mason said, his voice quiet, but carrying enough authority to silence the conversations around them. Claire isn't scared of being alone. She chose to be alone rather than stay with someone who didn't respect her. And this... He looked down at Claire, finding her eyes already on his. This isn't pretend. Not for me. The words came out before he could stop them, raw, honest, completely off script. Claire's eyes widened, her lips parting slightly. Thomas sputtered, but James, wonderful, chaos-loving James, chose that moment to intervene. Buddy, James said, clapping Thomas on the shoulder with false cheer, I think the lady's made her choice pretty clear. Maybe it's time to accept it and move on. There's a whole world of women out there who might appreciate whatever it is you're offering. Stay out of this. Can't do that, mate. See, Mason's my best friend, and if you keep bothering his girlfriend, we're going to have a problem. And by we, I mean me, and these surprisingly intimidating art collectors who are starting to stare. Indeed, a small crowd had gathered, watching the drama unfold with the rapt attention of people who'd expected boring gallery talks and gotten reality television instead. Thomas looked around, finally registering the audience. His face went from red to pale, then back to red. This isn't over, he said, but it sounded more desperate than threatening. Yeah, it really is, Claire said softly. I'm sorry, Thomas, but it's been over for months. I need you to respect that. For a moment, Mason thought Thomas might argue further, but something in Claire's expression, gentle but immovable, finally seemed to penetrate. Fine, Thomas muttered, then turned and disappeared into the crowd. Silence descended over their little group. Well, Emma said brightly. That was dramatic. Who wants wine? As the crowd dispersed and James launched into an animated retelling of events for Emma's benefit, Mason and Claire remained frozen, his arm still around her waist, her hand still resting on his chest. Did you mean it? Claire whispered. What you said about it not being pretend? Mason's heart was thundering so hard he was certain she could feel it. This was the moment he could tell her everything or maintain the lie. Mason, Claire! A new voice cut through, and they sprang apart like guilty teenagers as Marcus, Mason's colleague, approached with his usual oblivious enthusiasm. Brilliant opening, yeah? Have you seen the photographs of the Brunel Bridge series? Absolutely stunning use of negative space. The moment shattered. Claire stepped back, a professional smile sliding into place. We should look at those, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Right, yes, the photographs. As they moved through the gallery, maintaining appropriate distance, making appropriate conversation, Mason's words hung between them like unfinished music. Not pretend, not for me. He'd said it. He couldn't take it back. And from the way Claire kept glancing at him when she thought he wasn't looking, she hadn't forgotten either. 3 days passed in careful avoidance. Claire threw herself into editing photos. Mason buried himself in blueprints. They texted, brief surface-level messages that studiously ignored the elephant in the room, until Mason's mother showed up unannounced. Darling! Margaret Harper's voice echoed through Mason's apartment building like a foghorn of maternal enthusiasm. I'm coming up. Don't you dare tell me you're busy. Mason stared at his phone in horror. His mother. Here. In 15 seconds. He looked around his decidedly bachelor apartment. Dishes in the sink, laundry on the chair, zero evidence of a girlfriend who'd been dating him for 3 weeks. He did what any rational man would do. He panicked. Code red, he texted Claire. My mother is here. What? Here now in the elevator. Mason, I'm at my studio. Please, she thinks we're dating. She'll want to meet you. We are fake dating. She doesn't know it's fake. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, on my way, 10 minutes, stall her. 10 minutes, he could do this. The doorbell rang or not. Darling! His mother swept in like a perfumed hurricane, all cashmere and expensive jewelry and motherly concern. You look thin. Are you eating? And this apartment. Mason Harper, you live like a university student. Mum, lovely to see you. Where is she? Margaret spun around, surveying the space with the sharp eye of a woman who'd raised 3 sons and could spot deception at 50 paces. Where's this mysterious girlfriend James won't stop texting me about? Claire, she's just not here, Margaret finished, her eyebrow arching in that way that had made Mason confess to breaking the garden gnome in 1998. You're not lying to your poor mother, are you? What? No, she's at work. Photography emergency. Very urgent negative developing situation. Margaret's other eyebrow joined the first. Negative developing situation. It's very technical. I'm sure. She settled onto his sofa, crossing her legs with the air of someone prepared to wait indefinitely. I'll wait. We have so much to discuss, like how long you've been secretly in love with your best friend. Mason choked on air. We're not. How did you? Oh, darling, mothers know these things. She patted the cushion beside her. Sit. Tell me everything. When did you realize? How did it happen? Have you met her family yet as her boyfriend? Mum, we've been friends for 15 years. You've met her family 100 times. Yes, but not as the boyfriend. That's different. That's serious. Margaret leaned forward conspiratorially. James says you gave her a look at his wedding. Not the look again. A very significant look, apparently. He sent me screenshots of you two from the reception. Mason, darling, you were staring at her like she hung the moon. Because she did, Mason thought, but absolutely did not say. We're taking things slow, he managed. Too slow, you're 36. I want grandchildren before I'm 70. Mum! The apartment door burst open. He'd given Claire the spare key years ago, and she rushed in looking beautifully disheveled, camera bag sliding off her shoulder, hair escaping its bun. Sorry, I'm late, she gasped. The, negative developing situation took longer than... Mrs. Harper. Margaret stood with a delighted smile that made Mason's stomach drop. Claire, darling, or should I say future daughter-in-law, Mum, please. I'm kidding, mostly. Margaret pulled Claire into a hug, though James did send me a very detailed spreadsheet about wedding venues. Claire shot Mason to help me look over his mother's shoulder. He could only shrug helplessly. Mrs. Harper, it's so good to see you, Claire said, recovering her composure. I didn't know you were visiting. Neither did Mason, apparently. Margaret pulled back, studying Claire with the intensity of a museum curator, examining a potentially forged masterpiece. You look wonderful. Doesn't she look wonderful, Mason? She always looks wonderful. Sweet boy. Now sit, both of you. I want to hear everything. How it happened when you knew all the romantic details. They sat, too far apart, then catching themselves and moving closer. Mason's hand found Claire's automatically, their fingers interlacing with practiced ease that wasn't entirely practice anymore. They told the story they'd crafted, but Margaret kept interrupting with questions neither had anticipated. And where was this dinner? My place, Mason said. What did you cook? I cooked? Claire jumped in smoothly. That pasta dish with the sun-dried tomatoes. My favorite. Margaret beamed. He remembers your favorite. That's love. And when he walked you home, Margaret continued, what exactly did he say, word for word? Mason's mind went blank. Claire squeezed his hand in warning, or support, he couldn't tell which. He said, Claire spoke softly, looking at him, that he'd been scared for years, scared of ruining the most important friendship in his life. But he was more scared of never knowing if we could be something more. The words hung between them, achingly familiar. Because she was quoting him, quoting what he'd said just 3 nights ago at the gallery. Not pretend, not for me. And what did you say? Margaret asked, almost gently now. I said I'd been scared too, that I'd been waiting for him to see me differently. Claire's voice cracked slightly, that maybe we'd both been too scared for too long. Silence settled over the 3 of them. Margaret's eyes were suspiciously bright. Well, she finally said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue that appeared from nowhere. That's the most romantic thing I've heard in 30 years of marriage. Mason couldn't look away from Claire. She wouldn't look away from him. And somewhere in that locked gaze, something fundamental shifted. I should start dinner, Margaret announced, standing abruptly. You 2 stay here, talk, process, do whatever young people do. She disappeared into his kitchen, humming, leaving them alone on the sofa, hands still clasped, hearts racing. Claire, Mason started. Don't, she whispered. Not yet. I need to think. But she didn't let go of his hand, and he didn't pull away. A weekend away, James announced over pints 2 nights later, slamming his hand on the pub table with unnecessary force. That's what you 2 need. Mason pinched the bridge of his nose. James, no, hear me out. Emma and I are going to that resort in the Cotswolds, the fancy one with the spa and the ridiculous thread count sheets. We got a couples package, 2 rooms. You and Claire should come. That's really not. Marcus and his wife are coming too, and David from your office. It'll be brilliant. Couples weekend, massages, hiking. Those weird trust exercises Emma keeps talking about. Why are you so invested in our relationship? Because I've watched you pine for 15 years, mate. 15. Do you know how exhausting that was? You'd mention her name and get this look like a kicked puppy who'd just seen a rainbow. It was tragic. I did not. You absolutely did. Emma noticed it in 5 minutes when she met you. 5 minutes, she said. That man is catastrophically in love with his best friend. James took a long drink. So, yeah, I'm invested. Because you're finally doing something about it, and I'll be damned if I let you screw it up by not taking romantic weekend trips. Mason stared into his beer, considering. A weekend away with Claire. Sharing accommodations. Extended periods of pretending. Potential for disaster. Astronomical. I'll ask her, he heard himself say. Yes! James pumped his fist. This is happening. Romance, nature, overpriced cheese platters. Claire's response came via text. Is this a good idea? Mason typed and deleted 5 different responses before settling on, probably not. Want to do it anyway. 3 dots. Then, I'll pack a bag. Which is how, 48 hours later, Mason found himself pulling up to a manor house hotel that looked like it had been designed specifically to facilitate romantic complications. This is... Claire trailed off, staring up at the Honeystone building with its climbing roses and mullioned windows. Aggressively romantic? I was going to say dangerously charming, but yours works too. James and Emma burst out of the entrance like champagne corks. You made it! Come on, check-in is this way. The interior was all exposed beams, flagstone floors, and fireplaces large enough to roast entire oxen. Very cottagey, very coupley, very much designed for people in actual relationships. Right. The receptionist, a cheerful woman named Helen, beamed at them. Harper party, we have you in the honeysuckle suite. King bed, private balcony, complimentary champagne. Mason felt Claire stiffen beside him. I think there's been a mistake, he said carefully. We booked 2 rooms. Helen's smile never wavered as she checked her computer. I have you down for 1 room, the honeysuckle suite, booked and paid for by... She squinted at the screen. James Richardson. James! Mason called across the lobby. James appeared, looking entirely too pleased with himself. Yes? Why is there only 1 room? Because you're a couple. Couples share rooms. That's how coupling works. James, we specifically said, mate, there are no other rooms available. It's a couple's weekend package. Everyone's sharing. That's the point. He clapped Mason on the shoulder. Relax, it's 1 weekend. You've known each other for 15 years. What's the worst that could happen? Mason could think of several scenarios, all of them ending with his carefully controlled feelings exploding spectacularly. It's fine, Claire said quietly, though her voice was tight. We're adults. We can share a room for 2 nights. Exactly, James beamed. See? Claire gets it. Now come on, we're doing a group hike in an hour. As they rode the elevator to the 3rd floor, neither spoke. The silence felt heavy, loaded with unspoken concerns, and that thing that had been building between them since the gallery, since his mother's visit, since Claire had quoted his own words back to him. The honeysuckle suite was exactly as advertised, spacious, elegant, with a massive 4-poster bed dominating the center of the room like an elephant everyone was pretending not to see. 1 bed. There's a sofa, Mason said, already calculating if his 6'3" frame could fit on the clearly decorative settee by the window. Mason, that sofa is designed for fainting Victorian ladies, not actual sleeping. I'll make it work. Don't be ridiculous. The bed is enormous. She wouldn't look at him. We can share. Like you said, we're adults. Claire, I'm going to change for the hike, she said quickly, grabbing her bag and disappearing into the bathroom. Mason sat on the edge of the bed, the 1 bed, and dropped his head into his hands. Rule number 3, technically broken before they'd even unpacked. This weekend was either going to force them to finally talk about what was happening between them, or it was going to destroy everything they'd built over 15 years. He honestly didn't know which terrified him more. The Cotswolds hiking trail was objectively beautiful. Rolling hills, ancient stone walls, sheep dotting the landscape like fluffy clouds that had fallen to earth. Claire barely noticed any of it. She was too busy being hyper-aware of Mason walking beside her, his hand occasionally brushing hers as they navigated the narrow path. Every accidental touch sent electricity up her arm. So, Emma bounded up beside them with the energy of someone who hadn't just climbed a hill that Claire's lungs were still protesting. How are you 2 finding the suite? Romantic enough? It's very nice, Claire managed. Nice? Nice? Emma looked personally offended. Claire, there are rose petals on the bed, and that bathtub could fit 3 people. I specifically requested the most romantic room they had. You specifically, wait, you planned this with James? Obviously, someone had to help you 2 along. Emma linked her arm through Claire's, forcing Mason to drop back. Now, real talk, have you guys, She made a gesture that was probably meant to be subtle, but absolutely wasn't. Emma, what? You've been together for weeks. The tension is killing me. James has a bet going. He thinks you haven't yet because Mason's being respectful. She made air quotes. I think you haven't because you're both terrified. We're not... Babe, Emma interrupted gently. I've known you for 3 years. I've watched you orbit around Mason at every social gathering like planets around a sun. And I've seen him look at you like you're the only person in every room. So either you're both incredible actors or you're both idiots. Claire's throat tightened. What if we ruin everything? What if you don't? Emma squeezed her arm. Look, I know it's scary, but you know what's scarier. Waking up at 50 and wondering, what if? Before Claire could respond, a shout came from ahead. They rounded a bend to find James standing at the edge of a small stream, looking pleased with himself. Trust exercise, he announced. We're crossing the stream. Partners have to help each other across. James, this is a public footpath, Marcus pointed out. There's literally a bridge 10 meters that way. Bridges are for quitters. This is about teamwork and trust. This is about you wanting to cause chaos, David's wife Lisa said flatly. That too, now come on, pair up. The stream wasn't particularly wide or deep, but the stones were slick with moss and spaced awkwardly apart. Emma went first with James, nearly pulling him into the water when she lost her balance. Marcus and his wife navigated it with careful, boring competence. David and Lisa bickered the entire way across. Then it was Claire and Mason's turn. I've got you, Mason said, stepping onto the first stone and offering his hand. Claire took it, his grip warm and solid. She stepped onto the stone beside him, wobbling slightly. His other hand immediately came to her waist, steadying her. Okay, he asked, his face close to hers. Yeah, she breathed. I'm okay. They moved together, stone to stone, his hands never leaving her, one holding hers, one at her waist, his entire focus on keeping her safe. Halfway across, her foot slipped. She gasped, arms flailing, and suddenly she was pressed against his chest, both his arms wrapped around her, her hands clutching his shoulders. They stood frozen, balanced precariously on a rock barely big enough for one person, let alone two. Water rushed around them. The world narrowed to the space between their bodies, the sound of their breathing, the way his eyes had darkened as they stared at her mouth. I've got you, he whispered again, and it sounded like a promise for more than just this moment. I know, she whispered back. Kiss, kiss, kiss. James started chanting from the opposite bank. Emma immediately joined in. Then Marcus, probably out of peer pressure. Even Lisa got involved. The spell broke. Claire laughed, colour flooding her cheeks. Mason grinned, shaking his head at their friends. Come on, he said, before James starts a full musical number. He lifted her, actually lifted her, and carried her the last few steps to the bank, setting her down gently on solid ground. My hero, James called out in a falsetto, saving his damsel from certain ankle dampness. You're the worst friend I've ever had, Mason informed him. And yet I'm the reason you're finally with the love of your life. So you're welcome. The words love of your life hung in the air. Claire didn't look at Mason. Mason didn't look at Claire, but his hand found hers again, and she let it stay there for the rest of the hike. And that evening, the group gathered for dinner in the Manners restaurant, all candlelight and white tablecloths and food that came in portions that wouldn't fill a toddler. This is $45 for 3 asparagus spears, David muttered, studying his plate. It's art, David, Lisa said. You're supposed to appreciate the presentation. I'd appreciate 4 more asparagus spears. Claire barely tasted her food. She was too conscious of Mason beside her, his thigh occasionally brushing hers under the table. Every touch felt deliberate now, weighted with meaning. So, James said loudly. Everything James did was loud. I have an announcement. Emma and I are engaged. The table erupted. Emma was crying happy tears. Lisa was crying sympathetic tears. Even Marcus looked misty-eyed. It happened this afternoon, Emma said, showing off a ring that caught the candlelight. On the hike, right after the stream. That's why I insisted on the trust exercise. James looked triumphant. It was romantic symbolism, crossing into a new chapter of our lives together. I thought you just wanted to cause chaos, David said. I'm complex. I contain multitudes. James raised his glass. To love, to trust, to forcing your friends to do uncomfortable outdoor activities that lead to proposals. To James, everyone chorused, laughing. As the celebration continued around them, Mason leaned close to Claire's ear. You okay? You're quiet. She turned to look at him, their faces inches apart. Just thinking. About? About how James is right about some things, even if his methods are questionable. Such as. She took a breath, courage building. Maybe sometimes you have to take a leap. Cross the stream, risk getting wet. Mason's eyes searched hers. Claire, back to your rooms, everyone, James suddenly announced. And we have couples spa treatments at 9 tomorrow morning, which means we need beauty sleep. Well, some of us need it more than others. He looked pointedly at Marcus, who threw a bread roll at him. As they filed out, Emma pulled Claire aside. Hey, whatever's happening between you two, don't overthink it. Sometimes the best things are the scariest things. Claire hugged her. Congratulations, really. Thanks. And Claire, that room only has one bed for a reason. Emma winked. Use it wisely. Back in the honeysuckle suite, the enormous bed seemed to have grown even larger. They got ready for sleep with elaborate politeness. Claire in the bathroom, Mason changing in the room. She emerged in pajama shorts and a tank top to find him already in bed, on the far left side, leaving her the entire right half. I can still take the sofa, he offered. Mason, you'd be crippled by morning. She climbed into the bed, leaving a careful expanse of expensive sheets between them. They lay on their backs, staring at the ceiling, both rigid as boards. This is ridiculous, Claire finally said. We've fallen asleep on each other's sofas 100 times. This is different. Why? You know why. They did know why. The air between them was thick with it. All the things they weren't saying, all the feelings they were pretending not to have. Good night, Mason, Claire whispered. Good night, Claire. She closed her eyes, certain she'd never sleep. She was wrong. Sometime in the deep night, her subconscious made a decision her conscious mind was still debating. She woke around 3 a.m. to find herself curled against Mason's side, her head on his chest, her hand resting over his heart. His arm was around her, his hand in her hair, their legs tangled together. He was awake too. She could tell from his breathing. Neither of them moved. Neither spoke. They just lay there in the darkness, holding each other, pretending to be asleep while being more awake than they'd ever been. And somehow, that felt like the most honest thing they'd done in weeks. Mason woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and Claire's hair in his face. Her head was still on his chest, her breath warm against his collarbone, her hand curled in his t-shirt like she was afraid he'd disappear. He'd spent most of the night awake, cataloguing every detail. The weight of her against him, the smell of her shampoo, the tiny sounds she made while sleeping. Memorizing it all because soon this would be over. Soon they'd break up and go back to being just friends, and he'd never get to hold her like this again. The thought made his chest physically ache. Claire stirred, making a soft humming sound. Then she went completely still. Good morning, Mason said quietly. She swallowed. We're very tangled. We are. I don't remember. I must have... She started to pull away, but his arm tightened instinctively. Don't, he said, then caught himself. I mean, we have to be at breakfast in 20 minutes anyway. Might as well stay comfortable. It was a terrible excuse. She knew it. He knew it. She stayed anyway. Mason. Her voice was muffled against his shirt. Yeah? This is getting complicated. I know. We should probably talk about it. We should. Neither of them moved. A knock at the door made them spring apart like teenagers caught by parents. Claire tumbled off the bed entirely, landing in an undignified heap of tangled sheets and pajamas. Lovebirds, James's voice carried through the door. Breakfast in 15, don't make me come in there. We're awake, Claire shouted, climbing to her feet with as much dignity as someone could manage while wrapped in expensive hotel bedding. Were you decent, I'd have already barged in, James replied cheerfully. See you downstairs, wear something spa-appropriate. His footsteps retreated. Claire looked at Mason, hair wild, cheeks flushed, looking absolutely beautiful and completely mortified. I'm going to shower, she announced. A long shower, a very long shower where I contemplate my life choices. Claire. But she was already disappearing into the bathroom, the door clicking shut with finality. Mason flopped back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Brilliant, Harper. Really stellar work. The spa was attached to the manor, all white robes and cucumber water, and employees who spoke in hushed, reverent tones about wellness journeys. Couples massage, the receptionist announced, with the enthusiasm of someone revealing lottery results. You'll be in the Serenity Suite together. Together? Claire repeated faintly. Yes, side-by-side tables. It's our most popular treatment for romantic getaways. Of course it was. The Serenity Suite featured 2 massage tables approximately 18 inches apart, soft music playing, and candles creating what was clearly meant to be an intimate atmosphere. They were instructed to disrobe to their comfort level and lie face down under the sheets. Mason turned his back while Claire changed. She did the same for him. They were being so scrupulously respectful, it was almost painful. Ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. They lay down, faces in the cradles, separated by less than 2 feet. Mason could hear every breath she took. 2 masseuses entered, calm, professional women who introduced themselves and immediately began working scented oils into their shoulders. "Try to relax," Mason's masseuse said kindly. "You're very tense." That was an understatement. For 20 minutes, there was only the sound of soft music and the gentle working of muscles. Mason tried to relax. Failed spectacularly. His mind kept drifting to Claire beside him, wondering if she was actually relaxed, if she was thinking about last night, if she was having the same crisis of feelings that he was. "You can turn over now," his masseuse said. Mason opened his eyes to find Claire already on her back, sheet pulled up to her shoulders, staring at the ceiling. She turned her head slightly and their eyes met. He watched her breath catch, watched color bloom across her cheeks, watched her bite her lower lip in that way that meant she was thinking too hard about something. The masseuses worked in synchronized silence, but Mason was only aware of Claire, the way her eyelashes fluttered when she closed her eyes, the small sounds she made when the masseuse hit a particularly tense spot, the way she kept stealing glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking. He was always looking. "You two are so peaceful together," Claire's masseuse observed. "You can always tell when a couple is truly in love. There's an energy." Mason's hand, resting on his massage table, twitched involuntarily. Claire's hand, on her table, was barely 2 inches away. Without thinking, he shifted his fingers until they brushed hers. She didn't pull away. Slowly, carefully, their fingers intertwined in the space between tables, hidden from the masseuse's view by the sheets. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. The rest of the massage passed in a haze of touch and tension, and things neither of them could say out loud. Lunch was served on the terrace, where James immediately launched into wedding planning. "June wedding," he declared. "No, wait, September. Perfect weather for outdoor ceremonies." "James, you just got engaged yesterday," David pointed out. "Time waits for no man. Emma and I have been together 3 years. We know what we want." 3 years? Mason raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you say we were rushing things at 3 weeks? That's different. You and Claire are childhood sweethearts. Well, adolescent sweethearts. The point is you have 15 years of foundation." "We weren't sweethearts for 15 years. Semantics." James waved this away. "The energy was always there. We all saw it. You'd walk into a room and immediately locate each other. At my birthday party in 2019, I literally timed it. 12 seconds before you two found each other in a crowd of 40 people. That's just... we're friends. We've always been friends. Friends who look at each other like that?" James gestured at them. "Mate, you're looking at her right now the way I look at Emma, which, by the way, is the way Emma looks at wedding cakes." "James has a point," Emma said. "You do have a very intense gazing situation happening." Claire, who'd been silent through this entire exchange, suddenly stood. "I need some air." She walked away quickly, heading toward the gardens. Mason immediately followed. "Let them go," Emma said when James moved to follow. "They need to talk." "But I want to hear the talk." "James, no." Mason found Claire by a fountain, arms wrapped around herself despite the warm afternoon sun. "I'm sorry," he said, "about all of this." "James is..." "Right," she interrupted. "James is right, Mason." His heart stopped. "What?" She turned to face him, and he'd never seen her look so vulnerable. "I don't know when it happened. Maybe it was always there and I was too scared to see it. But somewhere between pretending and real, I've completely lost track of the line. Claire, let me finish, please." She took a shaky breath. "I thought I could do this. Fake date my best friend, help solve my Thomas problem, and go back to normal. But there is no normal anymore. Because every time you touch me, every time you look at me, every time you do something stupidly thoughtful, like remembering my favorite pasta or carrying me across a stream, I can't pretend it doesn't mean something." Mason felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't want this to be fake anymore." Her eyes were shining. "And I'm terrified because if this goes wrong, I lose my best friend. I lose the person who knows me better than anyone. But I'm more terrified of wondering what if for the rest of my life." The world narrowed to just her face, her words, this moment. "Claire Morrison," Mason said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have been in love with you since the day you laughed so hard at one of my terrible jokes that you snorted coffee out your nose. I've been in love with you through 3 of your relationships, and 2 of mine. I've been in love with you at weddings and funerals and boring Tuesday afternoons, and I've been absolutely terrified of telling you because losing you would destroy me." She let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "We're idiots. Complete idiots. 15 years. 15 years. They stared at each other, the weight of confession settling around them. This was it, the moment everything changed. "So what do we do now?" Claire whispered. Mason stepped closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in her green eyes. "We stop pretending." "And start what?" "Something real." He reached up, cupped her face gently. "If you want that. I want that." She leaned into his touch. "I'm scared, but I want that." "Me too. Both parts." He brushed his thumb across her cheekbone, and she shivered. This was it. This was the moment he could finally kiss her, finally show her everything he'd been feeling. "There you are," James's voice shattered the moment like a thrown brick through glass. "We're doing trust falls in the garden. It's mandatory, for team building." Mason closed his eyes in pain. "James, I will actually murder you." "Murder me after trust falls. Come on." As James dragged them back toward the group, Claire's hand slipped into Mason's. "Later," she said quietly. "Later," he promised. But later would have to wait, because sometimes the universe had a terrible sense of timing. 2 weeks after the Cotswolds trip, Mason's phone rang at 7 a.m. on a Saturday. Never a good sign. "Engagement party," James announced without preamble. "Tonight, my place. Mandatory attendance for my best friend and his girlfriend." "James, it's 7 in the morning. Love doesn't sleep, mate. Neither does party planning. See you at 8. Dress nice. Bring Claire. There will be speeches." He hung up before Mason could protest. Mason stared at his phone, then at the ceiling, contemplating the complexities of having James Richardson as a best friend. They'd confessed feelings 2 weeks ago. They'd talked for hours about taking things slow, about figuring out how to transition from friends to more than friends without destroying everything. They'd agreed to keep things private until they were sure. They hadn't kissed yet. Every time they got close, and they got close a lot, something interrupted. James. Work calls. Claire's neighbor's cat somehow ending up in her studio. The universe seemed committed to preventing their first kiss. It was driving them both slowly insane. Mason texted Claire, "James is throwing an engagement party tonight. Be my date? Your real date or your fake date that's actually real, but we're pretending is still fake to everyone else date? The complicated one. Perfect. I'll wear something that says I'm definitely in a real relationship, but we haven't actually kissed yet, so I'm in a constant state of romantic confusion. They make dresses for that. Mason, they make dresses for everything." Ters to be Sinter, James and Emma's flat was packed with people by the time Mason arrived with Claire. She wore a dark green dress that made her eyes luminous, and Mason had to actively remind himself to breathe like a normal human. "You look beautiful," he said for the 3rd time since picking her up. "You've mentioned that," she said, but she was smiling. "Worth repeating." They walked in hand, a gesture that now felt loaded with meaning. Every touch was significant, every glance electric. They were walking a tightrope between what everyone believed and what they were actually becoming. "The happy couple," James appeared, already slightly drunk. Come in, we have champagne, and tiny sandwiches, and, wait for it, a slideshow." "A slideshow?" Mason repeated with dread. "Of me and Emma through the years, but also—" James's grin turned wicked. "Of you two, because we all saw this coming." "James, no." "James, yes. I've been collecting photos for years. Remember that time at the beach when Claire fell asleep on your shoulder? Got it. That Christmas party where you danced together? Got it. Your face at my wedding? Oh, I got that." Mason looked at Claire in panic. She looked back with equal alarm. "This is going to be humiliating," she whispered. "Catastrophically so," he agreed. The slideshow started innocently enough, James and Emma's relationship highlights appropriately sappy. Then James's voice boomed over the speakers. And now, a tribute to the couple we all knew would happen eventually. The first photo appeared. Mason and Claire at 19, University Freshers' Week. She was laughing at something, mid-turn, and he was watching her with an expression that could only be described as besotted. "Oh, God," Mason muttered. "You're looking at me like I hung the moon," Claire whispered, awed. "I was probably thinking that," he admitted. Photo after photo followed, A decade and a half of stolen glances, comfortable touches, unconscious gravitation toward each other. At a Christmas party, her hand on his arm. At the beach, his jacket around her shoulders. At James's wedding, them dancing close, his hand at the small of her back, both looking at each other like no one else existed. The room was silent except for the soft music. Even James had stopped his commentary, letting the images speak. The final photo was from the Cotswolds trip. Someone had captured them by the fountain, the moment right before James interrupted. Mason's hand on her face, Claire looking up at him, the space between them charged with everything unsaid. 15 years, James said softly. 15 years of being in love and too scared to do anything about it. Until now. He raised his glass. To Mason and Claire, to finally getting your heads out of your asses, to love that was always there, waiting to be acknowledged. To Mason and Claire, the room echoed. Mason couldn't look away from Claire. She was crying, mascara threatening to run, and somehow still the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "Did you know," she asked, "that we looked like that?" "No," he said honestly, "but everyone else did, apparently. We wasted so much time. Then let's not waste any more." He pulled her toward the balcony, away from the crowd, needing space, needing air, needing to be alone with her. Outside, the Bristol night was warm, city lights twinkling below. Claire leaned against the railing, Mason beside her, their hands finding each other automatically. "This is real now," she said. "Everyone knows. Everyone expects—" What do they expect? Us. Together. Actually together. She looked up at him. "Mason, I meant what I said at the Cotswolds. I want this." "But I'm terrified of ruining what we have," he finished. "I know, me too." "So what do we do?" He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands. "We stop being scared. We trust what we feel, and we—" The balcony door burst open. "Speech time!" James bellowed. "Mason, you're up first." Of course he was. Inside, someone handed him a microphone. The room went quiet, all eyes expectant. Mason looked at Claire, standing near the back, nervous and beautiful. Screw it. If he couldn't kiss her yet, and apparently the universe was determined to prevent that, at least he could tell her the truth in front of everyone who mattered. "I'm not good at speeches," he started. "I'm an architect. I work with blueprints and buildings, not words. But I need to say this." Claire's eyes widened. James's slideshow showed 15 years of me being in love and too scared to say it. Everyone saw it except the two people it mattered to. He found her in the crowd, held her gaze. "Claire Morrison, you're my best friend. You've been there through everything, the good, the bad, the catastrophically embarrassing. And somewhere in all those years, friendship became something more." The room was utterly silent. "I love you. Not just as my best friend, as everything. And I'm done pretending otherwise." Claire was crying. Half the room was crying. James was sobbing openly. Mason set down the microphone and crossed to her. "Your turn," he said quietly. "I love you too," she whispered. "I've probably loved you for years and been too blind to see it." The room erupted in applause, but they barely heard it, because this was their moment finally, and nothing was going to interrupt. James's voice cut through. "Now get married already so I can be best man." 3 days after James's party, reality intruded in the form of Alexander Wright. Alexander Wright was exactly the type of man who made other men reflexively stand up straighter. Effortlessly wealthy, impeccably dressed, with the kind of confidence that came from never having heard the word no without a negotiation following. He was also very interested in investing in Mason's latest architectural project, and, unfortunately, very interested in Claire. "Mason Harper." Alexander crossed the cafe where Mason and Claire were having lunch, hand extended. "I've been trying to reach you. Your secretary said I might find you here." Mason stood, shaking the offered hand. "Mr. Wright, I wasn't expecting— I don't believe in appointments when opportunity calls." Alexander's attention shifted to Claire, his smile warming considerably. "And who is this lovely lady?" "Claire Morrison," she said politely. "I'm a photographer, yes. I've seen your work at the Ashford Gallery. Stunning composition." "That series on urban architecture?" He kissed her hand, actually kissed it. "Brilliant." Mason's jaw clenched involuntarily. "Thank you," Claire said, gently extracting her hand. "Mason's told me about your project proposal." "Ah, mixing business with pleasure. How modern." Alexander pulled up a chair without being invited. "Actually, Miss Morrison, I'd love to discuss commissioning you for the project photography. We'll need someone with your particular eye for capturing spatial relationships." "That's generous, but I insist. Perhaps we could discuss it over dinner tomorrow night." "She's busy," Mason said before he could stop himself. Alexander's eyebrow arched. "Is she? Miss Morrison, are you busy?" Claire looked between them, clearly sensing the testosterone-fueled tension. "Mason and I have plans." "Cancel them," Alexander said, with the casual presumption of someone used to getting his way. "This could be career-defining work, international exposure. Your photographs in architecture journals worldwide." He wasn't wrong. It was an incredible opportunity, which made Mason feel like an absolute arse for wanting to tell him to leave immediately. "I'll think about it," Claire said diplomatically. "Wonderful. I'll have my assistant call you." Alexander stood adjusting his suit jacket. "Mason, I'll email you about the investment details. We should move quickly on this. Opportunities don't wait." He nodded to Claire. "A pleasure, Miss Morrison." "Until tomorrow." He left with the same confident energy he'd arrived with, leaving a check for their lunch that neither of them had asked him to pay. "Well," Claire said after a moment, "that was presumptuous, arrogant. Did he actually kiss your hand?" "You're jealous," she said, a smile playing at her lips. "I'm not." He stopped. "Okay, yes, I'm jealous. He kissed your hand and offered you international photography exposure, and has enough money to probably buy this entire street." "Mason, and you should take the job. Obviously, it's an amazing opportunity. Did you miss the part where he asked me to dinner?" "I caught that part, loudly, with extreme clarity." Claire reached across the table, taking his hand. "I'm not interested in Alexander Wright. He's successful, rich, probably doesn't have anxiety about expressing his feelings. He's not you." The simplicity of it stopped Mason cold. "I spent 15 years not seeing what was right in front of me," Claire continued. "I'm not going to mess this up now by being swayed by some flashy investor who thinks money solves everything. But the photography opportunity is something I can negotiate on my terms during business hours, with you involved since it's your project." She squeezed his hand. "Mason, I love you. Some charming rich guy with good cheekbones isn't going to change that." "His cheekbones were pretty good," Mason admitted grudgingly. "Yours are better. You're just saying that. I'm a photographer. I notice bone structure professionally. Yours is superior." Despite himself, Mason smiled. "This is ridiculous. I'm being ridiculous. You're being human and kind of adorable." She stood, coming around to his side of the table. "But you know what would help?" "What?" "If you'd finally kiss me. We've been theoretically together for weeks now. We've confessed our feelings multiple times. We've shared a bed, and yet the universe keeps interrupting. So don't let it." They were in a public cafe surrounded by other patrons and the afternoon lunch crowd. Not exactly the romantic first kiss location Mason had been imagining, but Claire was looking at him with those green eyes, challenge and affection mixed together, and suddenly the location didn't matter. He stood, cupped her face in his hands the way he'd been dying to do properly for weeks, and leaned down. His phone rang. Loud, insistent. Alexander Wright's number on the screen. "Don't answer it," Claire said. "I'm not going to answer it." "Good." They leaned in again. A crash from the kitchen. Someone yelling. The cafe manager rushing past them. The fire alarm starting to blare. "You have got to be kidding me," Mason said to the universe in general. Claire started laughing. Actual, genuine laughter that made her eyes crinkle and her whole face light up. "We're cursed. We're actually cursed." Apparently. They filed out with the other patrons, standing on the pavement watching firefighters arrive for what turned out to be a small grease fire and a lot of smoke. "This is our life now," Claire said, still grinning. "Forever interrupted. Maybe we should plan it, schedule it. Kiss Claire, Tuesday at 3 p.m. Confirm no fire alarms first." "Very romantic. I'm an architect. I believe in proper planning." She took his hand, threading their fingers together. "Mason, yeah? When it finally happens, and it will happen, it's going to be worth the wait. Promise?" "Promise." They stood there on the street, sirens wailing, crowd gathering, smoke billowing from the cafe. And somehow it felt perfect, because they were together. Finally, actually, really together. Even if the universe seemed determined to keep them from kissing. "We need to get engaged." Mason looked up from his architectural blueprints to find James standing in his office doorway with the expression of someone who'd just solved world hunger. "I'm sorry, what?" "Not to me, you idiot. To Claire." James walked in, uninvited as always, and dropped into the chair across from Mason's desk. "Thomas is still not getting the message." Mason's jaw tightened. "He's still bothering her. He showed up at her studio yesterday, with more flowers, and a poem." "Her poem, Mason. One he wrote himself. It was about comparing her eyes to emerald pools of forgotten dreams. That's actually terrible. It gets worse. He's telling people you're just a rebound, that she'll come to her senses eventually." James leaned forward. "Mate, the man is delusional. You two have been publicly together for over a month now. You've confessed your feelings at my engagement party. You hold hands in public. You look at each other like you're starring in your own romantic film, and he still thinks he has a chance. So your solution is engagement. Nothing says I've moved on like an engagement ring." James looked far too pleased with this plan. "Besides, Emma and I are already planning our wedding. We can make it a double ceremony. How romantic would that be? James, Claire and I have barely kissed." Mason stopped himself. "Actually, we haven't kissed at all yet." James stared at him. "What? The universe keeps interrupting." "The universe? No, I'm not accepting this. You two are in love. How have you not kissed?" "Fire alarms, your interruptions, that incident with the cat in her darkroom, my mother showing up, that bird that flew into the restaurant window. Should I continue?" "This is unacceptable. You need to kiss her and get fake engaged to solve the Thomas problem. I'm solving multiple issues with one ring." "We can't fake get engaged, James." "That's what you've been doing this entire time." James raised an eyebrow. "Or have you forgotten this started as a fake relationship?" Mason had, actually. Somewhere between the Cotswolds trip and Claire whispering, "I love you," at the party. He'd completely forgotten any of this was supposed to be pretend. "Think about it," James continued. "Thomas sees an engagement ring. He finally accepts reality. You get to call Claire your fiancée, which is adorable. And it gives you both a romantic moment to finally kiss properly without cosmic intervention. I'm not proposing to Claire just to make Thomas go away. Then propose because you love her. Because you've loved her for 15 years. Because waiting any longer is just wasting time you could spend actually being together." James stood. "But do it soon. Emma wants to start planning, and she's getting impatient." He left, leaving Mason staring at the blueprints without really seeing them. Engaged. To Claire. His heart did something complicated in his chest. That evening, Mason found himself in a jewelry shop, feeling profoundly out of his depth. "Looking for something specific?" the saleswoman asked kindly. "An engagement ring. But I don't know what she likes. I mean, I know everything about her. Her coffee order, her favorite books, how she arranges her camera equipment. But jewelry?" He ran his hand through his hair. "I'm useless. Tell me about her." So he did. He talked about Claire's eye for beauty in unexpected places, her practical nature mixed with occasional romantic gestures, her hatred of ostentation, but appreciation for meaningful details. He described the way she looked at light, how she captured moments, the quiet way she moved through the world. The saleswoman listened, smiling, then showed him a ring, simple, elegant, with a center stone the exact green of Claire's eyes, set in delicate rose gold. "It's perfect," Mason breathed. "It's also expensive. I don't care." 20 minutes later, he walked out with the ring box burning a hole in his pocket and absolutely no plan for how to actually propose. Claire was in her studio, sorting through prints from a recent shoot, when Mason arrived with takeaway dinner and a nervous energy she immediately noticed. "You're fidgeting," she observed. "I'm not fidgeting. You've rearranged the chopsticks 3 times. He had. Mason forced his hands to still. "I need to talk to you about something." Claire set down her prints, giving him her full attention. "Okay, you're making me nervous. Thomas is still bothering you." "Oh," she relaxed slightly. "Yes, but it's fine, I can handle—" I don't want you to have to handle it. Mason stood, suddenly restless. You shouldn't have to deal with someone who won't respect your decisions. And apparently dating me isn't enough to convince him you've moved on. Mason, where is this going? He pulled out the ring box before he could lose his courage. Claire's eyes went wide. I know this started as fake, he said, words tumbling out faster than he could organize them. I know we agreed to pretend until Thomas gave up, but Claire, nothing about this feels fake anymore. It hasn't felt fake since... Maybe it never felt fake. Maybe I was just using it as an excuse to finally be close to you the way I've always wanted. Mason, let me finish, please. He opened the box. The ring caught the studio lights, throwing tiny green reflections across her workspace. I'm not proposing because of Thomas. I'm not proposing because James thinks it's a good idea, though he does. I'm proposing because I love you. Because I've loved you for so long I can't remember not loving you. Because when I imagine my future, you're in every single part of it. Claire's hand was over her mouth, tears already streaming. I know it's fast, Mason continued. I know we technically just started dating a month ago, even though we've known each other for 15 years. I know this is crazy and impulsive and nothing like the careful planning I usually do. But Claire Morrison, will you marry me? For real this time. For a long moment, she just stared at him. Then she laughed, a sound that was half sob, half joy. You're proposing in my studio, surrounded by photographs, with Thai food getting cold on my desk. I know it's not romantic. It's perfect, she interrupted, throwing her arms around his neck. It's us, it's absolutely perfect. Is that a yes? Yes, obviously yes, I love you, you ridiculously patient, impossibly sweet man. Yes, I'll marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, like everything with them. She stared at it, tears still falling, then looked up at him with those green eyes that matched the stone exactly. Mason? Yeah? You can kiss me now, thank God, he breathed. He cupped her face in both hands, tilting her chin up. Their eyes met for one perfect moment of anticipation. His phone rang. Don't you dare, Claire said. I'm not. He pulled it out, turned it completely off, and threw it across the studio onto her sofa. Nothing is interrupting this. Good. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to change her mind, time to breathe, time for the moment to be everything they'd been building toward. Their lips met. Finally. 15 years of friendship, weeks of fake dating, confessions and complications and cosmic interruptions, all of it led to this. Mason kissed her the way he'd been dreaming of for years, tender but insistent, gentle but thorough, pouring every ounce of love and longing into the connection. Claire made a soft sound against his mouth and pulled him closer, her fingers threading through his hair. The kiss deepened, grew more urgent. Years of restraint crumbled in the space of heartbeats. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Mason rested his forehead against hers. Worth the wait? He asked hoarsely. So worth it, she whispered, though we have a lot of lost time to make up for. We have the rest of our lives. Good. She kissed him again, softer this time. Because I plan to do that a lot. I'm counting on it. They stood there in her studio, holding each other, the ring sparkling on her finger, and for the first time in weeks, maybe years, everything felt exactly right. The universe could throw whatever it wanted at them now. They were engaged, for real this time. Claire's photography exhibition was scheduled for 3 weeks after the engagement. Unseen Moments would showcase 5 years of her work, but the centerpiece was the collection she'd been keeping secret from everyone, even Mason, until now. You're nervous, Mason observed, watching her pace her apartment the night before the opening. I'm about to show the world photos of you that I took over the last decade without you knowing. She turned to face him. Photos where I was clearly, obviously, head over heels in love with you. Photos that everyone will see tomorrow night. Including your mother. And James, who will never let us live it down. Mason crossed the room, pulling her into his arms. This was still new, being able to touch her freely, kiss her whenever he wanted, hold her close without pretending it was for show. 3 weeks of actual dating had been equal parts wonderful and frustrating as they navigated the shift from friends to couple while being constantly surrounded by people who wanted to celebrate with them. They still hadn't been alone together, really alone, and the tension was building. They're beautiful photos, he said, having seen them earlier that day when she'd finally shown him. You made me look far better than I actually look. I disagree. I captured you exactly as you are. She pulled back to look at him. Do you know how many times I almost deleted those photos? Because keeping them felt like admitting something I wasn't ready to admit. What changed? You did. Or we did. Or maybe I just got tired of being scared. She touched his face gently. Tomorrow night everyone's going to know. No more pretending it was sudden. They'll see the truth. I've been in love with you for years. Good, Mason said, kissing her forehead. Because I have been too. The gallery opening was packed. Claire's work had gained recognition over the past year, and the mysterious Unseen Moments collection had generated significant buzz in Bristol's art community. Mason arrived early, ostensibly to help Claire set up, but really to be her emotional support. She was vibrating with nervous energy, adjusting lights and checking angles for the 100th time. Claire, he said gently, it's perfect. You're perfect. Stop fidgeting. I'm a photographer. Fidgeting with equipment is what I do. You adjusted that light 3 times. It's exactly the same. You don't understand. I understand that you're terrified of being vulnerable, of showing people something real and true and deeply personal. He took her hands. But that's what makes great art. And this is great art. She leaned into him, accepting comfort. What if people think I'm obsessed or creepy? Or they'll think you're in love. Because you are. And it shows. He tilted her chin up. And I love that they'll see it. That they'll know. The first guests began arriving. Sarah immediately burst into tears upon seeing the collection. Emma had to sit down. Even James was uncharacteristically quiet, moving from photo to photo with increasing emotion. The exhibition was arranged chronologically. Early photos showed Mason and Claire in their late teens, him laughing at something off camera, her careful composition revealing affection in every frame. University photos followed. Mason concentrating on blueprints, sunlight catching his profile. Mason at a cafe, steam rising from his coffee, looking contemplative and beautiful. Then later years, Mason at weddings, at parties, at quiet dinners. In every photo, Claire's love was evident, not just in the technical skill, but in the intimacy of the moments captured, the way she'd caught his rare, genuine smiles, the softness in his expression when he thought no one was watching, the quiet strength in his posture, the intelligence in his eyes, the kindness in his gestures. The final photograph was the largest, Mason in his apartment, backlit by the harbor view, looking directly at the camera, directly at her. The expression on his face was unmistakable, love, pure and absolute. The title below read, "The Moment I Stopped Pretending." Mason stood before it, throat tight with emotion. He'd remembered that day. She'd been photographing his apartment for a magazine feature. He'd looked at her and thought with absolute certainty, I'm going to love this woman for the rest of my life. Apparently his face had shown everything. Well, a voice said beside him, I stand corrected. Mason turned to find Lucy, Claire's skeptical friend, studying the photograph with a bemused expression. All this time I thought it was fake, Lucy continued. I was so sure you were both lying. I had theories, evidence, a whole investigation going. She shook her head. But this, you can't fake this. This is, she gestured at the wall of photographs, this is years of love that neither of you acknowledged. We were idiots, Mason agreed. Spectacularly so, she smiled. But you figured it out eventually. That's what matters. More people gathered around the collection, murmuring appreciation. Mason heard fragments of conversations. Always knew they'd end up together. Can you imagine loving someone this long without saying it? The way she sees him in these photos. Claire appeared at his side, slipping her hand into his. Well, you made me look like someone worth loving, he said quietly. You are someone worth loving. I just helped other people see what I've always known. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Are you okay with this, with everyone knowing? Claire, I'm thrilled that everyone knows. I'm tired of pretending this is new. He turned to face her fully. I want everyone to know I've been yours for years, even when I was too scared to say it. She smiled, tears threatening. Careful, Mr. Harper. You're going to make me cry in front of my entire exhibition. Miss Morrison, he said formally, would you grant me the honor of being disgustingly affectionate in public? I thought you'd never ask. He kissed her right there, in front of the photographs, in front of their friends, in front of a gallery full of people. Kissed her like he'd been wanting to for years, like they had all the time in the world, like nothing else mattered. When they broke apart to applause and wolf whistles, courtesy of James, Claire was crying and laughing simultaneously. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." "Get a room," James called out. "Though preferably one with a working lock so I can't accidentally walk in." "That happened one time," Mason started. "One time too many. I'm traumatized." Emma appeared, dragging James away. "Let them have their moment." As the evening continued, Mason and Claire circulated separately, accepting congratulations and answering questions about the collection. But they kept finding each other across the room, gravitating together like magnets, unable to stay apart for long. Around 10 p.m., as the crowd began to thin, Mason found Claire on the gallery's back terrace, looking at the Bristol city lights. "Successful night," he said, joining her. "The gallery owner wants to extend the exhibition another month. Apparently the collection is a powerful meditation on patience and love." She turned to him. "We're a meditation now. Could be worse." "True." She was quiet for a moment. "Mason." "Yeah? Take me home. Your home." His heart kicked against his ribs. "Claire, I know what I'm asking." She looked at him steadily. "We're engaged. We love each other. We've waited long enough." "Are you sure?" "I've been sure for weeks, maybe years." She took his hand. "I want to be with you, really be with you. No more interruptions, no more waiting." Mason kissed her softly. "Let's go home." Mason's apartment had never felt more significant than it did with Claire standing in the middle of it, nervous and beautiful and his. He locked the door behind them, definitely locked it, and turned to find her watching him with an expression that made his heart race. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." They stood there for a moment, the weight of anticipation settling around them. 15 years of friendship, weeks of dancing around their feelings, and now, finally, they were here, alone, together, with all the time in the world. Mason crossed to her slowly, giving her time to change her mind, time to be certain. But Claire didn't hesitate. She met him halfway, rising on her toes to kiss him. This kiss was different from the others, deeper, more urgent, laced with promise and permission. His hands found her waist, pulling her closer. Her fingers threaded through his hair, tugging gently in a way that made him groan against her mouth. "Mason," she whispered, pulling back slightly. "I'm nervous." "Me too." "Really?" "Claire, I've been imagining this for years. Now that it's actually happening, I'm terrified of disappointing you." She laughed softly, touching his face. "That's impossible. You could never disappoint me. I want this to be perfect for you. It will be. Because it's you." She kissed him again, slower this time. "Just be with me. That's all I need." He took her hand, leading her to his bedroom. The harbour lights cast gentle shadows through the windows, and Bristol stretched out below them like a blanket of stars. Mason turned to face her, hands trembling slightly as he reached for the zipper of her dress. "Tell me if you want to stop. Any time." "I mean it." "I don't want to stop," she whispered. "I want you." He unzipped her dress slowly, reverently, pressing kisses to each new inch of skin revealed. The dress pooled at her feet, and he stepped back to look at her, really look at her, in the soft light. "You're so beautiful," he said, voice rough with emotion. "So incredibly beautiful." Claire's hands went to his shirt buttons, fingers fumbling slightly. He helped her, shrugging out of the shirt and pulling her close again, skin to skin, heat to heat. They moved to the bed together, all tangled limbs and soft laughter when they bumped noses, when her hand landed somewhere awkward, when he had to pause to kick off his shoes because he'd forgotten he was still wearing them. "Smooth," Claire giggled. "I'm trying to be romantic here." "You are romantic. You're also adorably clumsy right now. 15 years of build-up will do that to a man." She pulled him down beside her, and the laughter faded into something more serious, more profound. Mason traced patterns on her skin, learning her, memorizing her, worshipping every curve and line like she was sacred. "I love you," he whispered against her collarbone. "I love you so much." "Show me," she breathed. So he did. He showed her with gentle hands and tender kisses. with whispered words of adoration and reverence, with every touch designed to bring her pleasure, to show her how precious she was, how deeply he loved her. Claire responded with equal tenderness, equal passion, equal love. Her hands explored with curiosity and confidence. Her lips mapped territories she'd only dreamed of claiming. Her body moved with his, in a rhythm that felt both new and ancient, like they'd been doing this forever, like they were meant to fit together exactly this way. When they finally came together completely, both gasped at the intimacy of it. Not just physical, but emotional, spiritual, the joining of two people who'd been waiting years for this moment. "Okay?" Mason asked, voice strained with restraint. "More than okay," Claire managed. "Mason, move, please." He did, slowly at first, then with increasing urgency as they found their rhythm. Claire wrapped her legs around him, pulling him deeper, closer, until there was no space between them at all. "Claire," he groaned, "I'm not going to last." "It's okay," she gasped. "I'm close too, so close." He slipped his hand between their bodies, touching her where she needed, and that was all it took. She shattered around him with his name on her lips, and he followed immediately after, burying his face in her neck as pleasure overwhelmed him completely. They lay tangled together afterward, hearts racing, breathing ragged, both slightly stunned by the intensity of what they'd just shared. "That was—" Claire started. "Yeah," Mason agreed. "We should have done that weeks ago. We weren't ready weeks ago." "True." She turned her head to look at him. "But we're definitely doing it again, soon. Like, very soon." He laughed, pulling her closer. "Give me 10 minutes. 5. You're going to be the death of me." What a way to go, though. They stayed like that, wrapped in each other, talking quietly about everything and nothing, about how they'd each imagined this moment, about their fears and hopes, about how right it felt to finally be together like this. Eventually they made love again, slower this time, savoring every moment, every touch, every whispered declaration. And when they finally fell asleep, limbs still intertwined, Claire's head on his chest and his hand in her hair, Mason thought, this is it. This is everything. After 15 years of friendship, weeks of fake dating, and cosmic interruptions, they were finally, truly, completely together. And it was worth every moment of waiting. 3 months later, Mason woke to Claire photographing him. "Creepy," he mumbled, still half asleep. "Documentary evidence," she corrected, camera clicking. "Our first morning waking up in our apartment." Our apartment still made his chest feel tight with happiness. They'd moved in together 2 weeks ago, combining his harbor view space with her chaotic collection of camera equipment and prints. The result was beautifully imperfect. Just like them. "Coffee?" he offered, sitting up. "Please, and then we need to talk about the wedding." Right. The wedding. 3 weeks away. Small ceremony by the river, just close friends and family. Emma and James had offered to make it a double wedding, but Claire had gently declined, wanting their day to be just theirs. As Mason made coffee, his phone buzzed. An email from Alexander Wright's assistant, finalizing details for the architectural project. Claire had taken the photography commission, on her terms during business hours, with Mason present for all meetings. Alexander had been surprisingly professional once he understood she was genuinely, happily engaged. Another buzz. This one from James. "Bachelor party tonight. No excuses. Bring Mason." "James is planning something," Claire called from the bedroom. "How do you know?" "Because he texted me too. Apparently Emma's planning a bachelorette evening, which probably means she's going to cry about how beautiful love is." Accurate. That evening, as predicted, was chaos. James had organized what he called a sophisticated gentleman's gathering, which turned into karaoke at a pub where Marcus performed an emotionally devastating rendition of Your Song that made everyone cry into their pints. "To Mason!" James raised his glass, already drunk. "Who waited 15 years to kiss his best friend and is somehow not dead from sexual frustration." "James!" Emma smacked his arm. "Boundaries! What? It's a compliment to his restraint." Mason just laughed, accepting the ribbing. Because this was his life now, surrounded by people who loved him, about to marry the woman he'd loved for half his life. Finally, happy. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him check. "Mason Harper?" A familiar voice. Thomas? Mason stepped outside away from the noise. Thomas, what can I do for you? I saw the engagement announcement. In the paper. Thomas sounded tired, defeated. And I saw Claire's exhibition. The photographs. Okay. I understand now. What you two have. A pause. I've been an idiot. A persistent, delusional idiot who couldn't accept that someone moved on from me. Mason waited, surprised by the admission. I'm calling to apologize. To you and to Claire if she'll listen. I convinced myself that I was fighting for love, but really I was just... Thomas sighed. I was just scared of being alone, of admitting failure. Claire deserved better than that. She deserves what you give her. Thank you for saying that. For what it's worth, I hope you're happy together. You clearly have been for years, even when you were both too blind to see it. A hollow laugh. Everyone else saw it. Those photographs. That's real love, Mason. The kind I never gave her. They talked for a few more minutes. An actual conversation, absent of desperation or delusion. When they hung up, Mason felt a weight lift that he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. Thomas had finally let go. The wedding day arrived with perfect September weather. Golden light, warm breeze, leaves just beginning to turn. Claire wore an ivory dress, simple and elegant, with her hair half up and wildflowers woven through. Mason couldn't breathe when he saw her walking toward him along the riverside path. Hi, she said, reaching him. Hi, he managed. You're perfect. You're biased. Completely. The ceremony was short, intimate. They'd written their own vows, and when Mason spoke his voice shook with emotion. Claire, you've been my best friend since we were teenagers, who thought we knew everything and knew nothing at all. You've seen every version of me, the good, the embarrassing, the catastrophically awkward, and somehow you loved all of them. I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that love, to make you laugh when you're sad, to support your dreams as fiercely as you've supported mine, to never take for granted the miracle of being loved by you. Claire was crying before he finished. When it was her turn, she held his hands tightly. Mason Harper, I've been in love with you for so long that I can't remember when it started. Maybe it was always there, waiting for us to be brave enough to see it. You make me feel safe and challenged and cherished all at once. You see me, really see me, and love what you see. I promise to always be your partner, your friend, your home. To never let a day pass without telling you I love you. To take at least one embarrassing photo of you per week for our future children to mock. Laughter through tears from everyone present. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the officiant said. Mason, you may kiss your bride. Finally, Mason murmured, and kissed her like he meant it, which he absolutely did. Their first dance was to a song Claire had chosen, one that had been playing at a cafe 15 years ago when they first met. James cried through the entire thing. So did Emma, and Sarah, and Marcus, though he denied it. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Mason and Claire stood by the river, watching the water reflect the fairy lights. Mrs. Harper, Mason said, testing it out. I'm keeping Morrison professionally, she reminded him. But yes, I like the sound of it too. We did it, we're married. We are, legally and everything. She turned to face him, a smile playing at her lips. Though I should tell you something. What? I might have forgotten to take my birth control on our honeymoon week. She bit her lip. Well, not forgot exactly. More like deliberately left it at home. Mason's heart stopped. Claire, I took a test this morning. She pulled something from her clutch purse, a positive pregnancy test. Surprise. For a moment he just stared. Then he was lifting her, spinning her, laughing and crying simultaneously. We're having a baby. We're having a baby. She was crying too now, happy tears streaming. I know it's fast, but it's perfect. He set her down gently, hands immediately going to her still flat stomach. You're perfect. This is perfect. Even though we've technically only been dating for 4 months. We've been together for 15 years, Claire. We were just too stupid to kiss for most of it. She laughed, pulling him close. I love you. I love you too. Both of you. He kissed her softly, then dropped to one knee, pressing his lips to her stomach. Hi, little one. Your parents are idiots who took way too long to figure things out, but we promise to do better with you. Claire's hands threaded through his hair. Best fake relationship ever. Best real everything ever. Above them, Bristol's stars twinkled, and the river flowed steadily toward the sea, and somewhere in the distance, James was probably already planning a baby shower. But here, in this moment, it was just them, Mason and Claire Harper, no longer pretending, no longer waiting, finally living the love story that had been 15 years in the making. Leave your comment and share this story with someone special. It truly helps us keep bringing new stories to you. And if you want to follow every chapter of this emotional journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support makes all the difference.